there was so much movement.
In the summer of 1836, near the end of June, I went to the Four Lakes, where the city of Madison now stands, to trade some red deerskins. I had with me Simon Le Cuyer, Pierre and Jean Leroy. We found there Abraham Godin, Oliver Armelle, his native wife and 3 or 4 children, and Michael St. Cyr. Armelle and St. Cyr used to get goods from traders at Portage, and besides these were Charles Chalifot and Joel Pelletier, engaged in hunting and fishing. We met together about the 4th of July at the lake. They had venison and fish, and we had flour, pork, tea, coffee, sugar, and whiskey. Jean Leroy had his violin, and we had a great feast. I believe we were the first to celebrate the 4th at Madison. Oliver Armelle and Raven Woman, his wife, were intertwined with Portage's Métis community. As a trader at the Four Lakes, Armelle annually received his stock of trade goods from Portage, and appears to have been well known to Portage Métis families.
Hochunk Rajra, Hunchinu Kigaide, Naga Maika de Angeloga Hingaide, Hunchiki Kadach Hijawa Uhache. My Ho-Chunk name is Bear Woman, and my English name is Angela Lowe. I'm a member of the Bear Clan, and I am a 7th generation descendant of Oliver Armelle, a French fur trader from Canada, and Raven Woman, or Hinu Waina, a Ho-Chunk woman from Wisconsin. My ancestors were some of the first recorded people to be inhabiting Madison, Wisconsin, or we call it Dejo.
Which means good woman. And my father's name was Bear Clan, so I am the 6th generation related to Oliver Armelle. Well, we're part of the Bear Clan, and so that's where our names come from. They're strict about how you name your children. We wondered why our name was Lemire, because Ho-Chunk names are all very native names. And so the Lemire name was very unusual, and we never did understand why we were Lemire. But then our dad did tell us few things. My dad was Francis Lemire, and some of the things he did tell us was he was raised by his dad's parents, so that was his grandparents brought him up. So he learned to speak French, and later on in life he learned how to speak Ho-Chunk fluently. My dad said that they spoke French quite a bit so that the young people would not understand what they were talking about. Secret stories, I guess.
Frank Lemire, who raised Lenore's father, Francis, was Oliver Armelle's grandson. Not only would Frank have personally known Oliver Armelle for much of his own youth, but he also personally experienced his family's 1850s expulsion from Wisconsin, the Dakota War of 1862, the Ho-Chunk eviction to the deadly Crow Creek Reservation, his family's escape from there, and the eventual establishment of the Ho-Chunk Reservation in Nebraska. In turn, Frank and Julia, his wife, sought to offer a more stable childhood for Lenore's father.
Well, he used to talk about how they taught him a lot of things, and he had a very good childhood. And because Frank Lemire, he was a Francis, but they called him Frank, and so he thought they were very good people, and they brought him up until he was taken to attend Carlisle Indian School. He had an interesting home life, being raised, but he was raised in Winnebago, Nebraska.
Generation by generation, the Armelle family became integrated into the Ho-Chunk community, rather than assimilating into white society as some other Métis families chose to do.
There was a lot of movement among the Ho-Chunk at that time, and Oliver Armelle he married a full-blooded Ho-Chunk, but when they were removed in the 1840s, he moved with his Ho-Chunk wife, and he adopted that lifestyle for the rest of his life. From the notes I've seen or any writings, he was very close to the Ho-Chunk, and he was living that style. And he also had a trading post, so he knew quite a few of the Ho-Chunks. And the Ho-Chunk said he treated them very well, so.
Mom had just mentioned to me that she thought she read somewhere that Oliver Armelle was an orphan. So moving here to Wisconsin and meeting a Ho-Chunk woman, and then traveling to west to Minnesota, South Dakota, Iowa, and finally Nebraska. I think he had that connection to the Ho-Chunk people because that was his new family. So I think there was a strong commitment to the Ho-Chunk people, which is why he traveled with them. Even though he wasn't required as a non-tribal member to move out of the state.
Even before the forced expulsion, the Armelle family appears to have shifted their focus from the Four Lakes area of modern-day Madison to Prairie du Chien near the Ho-Chunk reservation, and the areas the government had set up to meet with Ho-Chunk people. Armelle purchased land in Prairie du Chien during the 1830s, but perhaps this was a matter of seasonal convenience rather than a permanent shift.
At those times, people seemed to move around quite a bit. I think Prairie du Chien was one of the sites that was set up for annuity payments for the Ho-Chunks, and so that's why they would go close to those areas, and then when that annuity payment was done, they went back to their home site.
Although Lenore and Angie still have family ties in Nebraska, their own branch of the family eventually chose to leave the reservation and return to Wisconsin.
There was so much movement. The Ho-Chunks that we moved to Winnebago, a lot of them came back to Wisconsin because they wanted to live in their original homelands. My dad was raised and lived around Winnebago for quite a few years until he was probably in his 20s. There's a big, large event that goes on, used to go on, called the Stanrock Indian Ceremonial. And my dad was a professional singer, and so he performed in that Stanrock Ceremonial. And that's how that my dad, Levere's side, moved back here at that time. And it was before 1930, because then he met my mother, who was a full-blooded Ho-Chunk, and so that's how we came back to be around here. But I attended school in La Crosse, Wisconsin, because my mother's family lived in around Holcomb, Minnesota, and so we lived in that area for a while and went to La Crosse school, and then we moved over towards Portage. North of Portage, we lived there for about 10 years, and that was the best years of our life. Very fun.
There's a story relating to Oliver Armelle about a belt that his future wife had woven for her previous husband. He saw the belt when he was in Canada, and he sought her out because he wanted to know the woman that had made that woven belt for her husband. So that's a story that goes back a long ways, and about kind of how we talk about, well, how did your parents meet? You know, it's a really intricate story about how a French fur trader came to be married to a Ho-Chunk woman, someone that lived in Canada, which isn't a distance away, but it's a wonderful story about how he came to find her.
Oliver Armelle's daughter, Catherine, married a Rock River trader who was by birth Alexander Marcellet, but who went by Alexander Lemire.
But there's a big, exciting story about how our name got changed to Lemire.
So the story goes that Alexander Marcellet was on an expedition, a fur trading expedition to, I believe it is Quebec. So while he was in Quebec, he contracted an illness. And while he was there, he was taken in by a local Catholic, what'd you call it, a nunnery? And the nuns cared for him there. So as an homage to the nuns and to the mother that took care of him, he changed his name to Lemire, which means the mother in French.
Lenore's grandfather, Oliver Lemire, is a prominent name as a contributor to early 20th century scholarship about Ho-Chunk people. Lemire personally wrote down some of the family traditions concerning Oliver Armelle and Raven Woman. Although recognized nationally, he was relatively unknown to Lenore's family.
But he did have some relation with his dad, Oliver Lemire. And, but Oliver Lemire was traveling all over the country, and he had a really interesting lifestyle. And my dad, Francis Lemire, did not explain a lot to us about him because actually he wasn't raised by him, and so he didn't understand everything. But he had some contact with him off and on when Oliver would be around. So, he's quite well noted with historical and authors and Wisconsin State Historical Society, because he worked with the society and he taught there, and he promoted the natives, and he wrote a major book called Winnebago, and he worked with Paul Radin. He also was a singer, and he did a lot of things. It was just, we don't understand where he got his education, because he went to Carlisle for maybe 1 year, and they didn't have, you know, the type of education that he seemed to, you know a lot of things and how to work with people.
He was born in McCook, South Dakota in 1879. In the early 1900s, he was introduced to Paul Radin, an anthropologist, ethnologist from New York. He met Paul Radin through the Nebraska Historical Society, and so Paul Radin had an interest in documenting back then they called it the Winnebago people. And Oliver was, like Mom said, he wasn't very well educated, but he was very intellectual. He was a good speaker, an excellent writer. He was entrepreneurial. He even was as noted as one of the first Native people to hold a government job in Nebraska. So when he met Paul Radin and traveled out east to share more information with Paul Radin about the Winnebago people, about the culture and the clans and the kinship. I think that opened his eyes to possibly returning to Wisconsin. So after his work with Paul Radin, he returned to Nebraska, and then he returned to Wisconsin, back at Dejo, where his family originated.
For Lenore and Angie, analytical writings about Ho-Chunk people like Radin's works contrast with historical accounts like Juliet Kinsey's Waban.
She was writing in detail about everyday life, you know, and it didn't matter what you were, you know. It was just a regular human-to-human life that she documented on a daily basis. So it's just fascinating.
I think that Paul Radin, his writings were more of a way to preserve the stories of the Ho-Chunk people, because they thought that we were going to be erased, you know, because they thought that we would cease to exist. So it was important to capture the language, the culture, and the history of the people, versus Juliet Kinsey, who was telling the story of daily life and her everyday contact with the Native Americans in the area.
I believe that Juliet Kinsey life story should be documented and made available to the public. It showed a way of life where two different cultures lived. And from her writing and from her artwork, she displayed a lot of historical factors too about the Ho-Chunk people, and I think that should be recognized too.
I want the next generation and generations going forward to know who they are and where they come from. Like I said before, if we had not had the good fortune of having someone document the stories of Oliver, Armelle, and Hinu, Waina, Raven Woman, we may not know where we came from. So it's wonderful to be able to reflect on that.
What amazes me is that they struggled. They had to walk out to where they were removed to. But when it came back, they struggled to come back. They walked back. And there's a book by Mona Wolfwoman, and she tells in there where she walked back to Wisconsin 3 times. And I just can't imagine, you know, the way we travel now and the way they traveled then. And a lot of them returned to Wisconsin, and they want to live in their homeland where they knew, and they tried to live the way that they lived before. And they suffered, but they were strong. They were very strong. The Ho-Chunks in the 1700s, they survived brutality and hunger and a lot of uncalled for death. That they lived through a lot of things, and they stayed strong, and they survived a lot of questionable history that was. They lived through it, and they remain strong today for that. And I think it's a story that should be told more. They talk about the Cherokee march, that how they were removed, but the Winnebago story never came out.